Everybody, time for take two. Yeah, let everybody kind of get back into the feed here. We started this off like I normally do. What's happening, everybody? Hope everybody's having a fantastic Saturday. If you're watching this on Saturday, chances are your Saturday did not quite go as well as you had hoped. Purple is the flavor of the evening. Hopefully this thing's back up and running. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty there for a minute, so that'll happen. Anthony's in. Blad's in. What's up, y'all? Shawnee's saying, what's up? What's up, Sean? Yeah, sorry about those technical difficulties. I think we got that worked out. I still have no idea how to flip the screen on this new phone, so everything's going to be in backwards letters. So yeah, Nitro's in, got the arm flex, I like it. So, chatting about tonight, life after mods. And what I'm basically getting at here is, in talking to some friends of mine, we're talking about different cars that we've owned over the years and, which cars do you wish you hadn't have sold and all that kind of good stuff. The typical car guy chatter. And, I'm fortunate enough to have a car basically that has stayed in the family for an extremely long time, and that's Foxy back over here. Foxy's been around since 1997, something like that. Anyway, Foxy's been around for a long time and has had a lot of different versions of herself. The car has been a 302 aluminum headed car, just regular NA. The car's had a supercharger on it. The way that it sits now is a naturally aspirated 351. So the thing is that with this car, about 15-ish years ago, it hit basically a stopping point. Like, it's no longer going to be modified. It just is what it is, and it's going to be driven around. As you guys know, or some of y'all know, recently had to put a new clutch into Foxy because the clutch disc itself, y'all are going to love this, and I'd love to show it to you. I'll have to bring it like a show and tell thing next time, but the actual pucks, the friction material, actually delaminated from the clutch disc. Like, the adhesive went bad. I think, if memory serves me, I think I was told it was a center force clutch. The adhesive that holds the pucks onto the actual clutch disc itself came off. And so what was happening is the clutch just was not being allowed to disengage. So the pressure plate was probably fine, but the clutch disc was junk. And, I went in and just replaced everything. Brand new McLeod clutch, new flywheel, the whole bit. But that's not really a modification. That's just, keeping the girl on the road. But in the conversation, the way that it was going, I was asking, how long do you typically hang on to cars that you modify, like really modify? Something like Foxy, where you're replacing an engine or, could be heads, cam, intake, whatever the case is. How long do you have that car? And then what do you do after that? What do you do when you get to the proverbial stopping point? And it's interesting. So let me just kind of walk you guys through the conversation that I had. I'd like to hear, y'all's experiences as well. But so basically the timeline, as soon as that major modification was done, the modification that actually kind of brought you from being stock to clearly modified, about 2 to 3 years after that, that car was gone. It had been sold on, new projects had come up, and for various reasons. Over the course of the years that we were talking about with these cars, different things come up in life. You start a family, start popping out kids, things like that. That could be a reason. You start running into reliability issues. That could be another reason. Could be a ton of different reasons why you start moving away from the modified cars and start getting other things. But I guess my thought on this was, okay, well, what else do you start getting into? Some guys are, have other hobbies and other interests other than cars. But other guys don't. I mean, they focus and their lifestyle is based around that car culture, that, cult of the automobile type thing, and they never get away from it. As you can see right there in the corner, I've got Sierra and Foxy and, the Revlon and the Camaro right over here. So there's sometimes you just simply cannot get away from it. But the interesting thing, though, number one to me was the timeline, where you don't see anybody really holding on to cars long term. And for good reason in a lot of cases. The next latest, whatever it is that you're into, the next Challenger, you want to go from a Scat Pack to a Hellcat, or from a 5.7 car to a Scat Pack, something along those lines. You're always looking up. There's always that next level that you can get to. Or, you get tired of a sedan and you want a lifted truck, or you get sick of a lifted truck and you want a Jeep, or you get sick of your Jeep and you want to get into, autocross racing or something along those lines. Get sick of autocross, you want to get into closed circuit and get a Miata. Go out there and tear ass with all the rest of the swarm. There's a lot of different facets to car culture and to the lifestyle of the automobile. And for the guys that modify a car and then leave it that way and never circle back to it, it's kind of a rarity. And that's one of the reasons why Foxy really isn't going to have anything else done to her. I was driving her today, and I got to admit, it's kind of weird. The car has lots of torque, lots of tip-in torque, but really no horsepower. And the car does make good horsepower. I mean, it did put just about 300 horsepower to the rear wheels, which, for an old pushrod small block, especially one that's low compression, that ain't half bad. And when you factor in the fact that this car really doesn't weigh all that much, it's a pretty damn quick car. But, what else would I do to it? What, LS swap it? Higher compression, put a different intake on it, put a blower back on it. For what? I mean, I don't know that I would get really anything out of it. And no matter what I do to the car at this point, it's not going to handle as well. It's not going to have the same ergonomics. It's not going to be as good as a brand new Mustang GT. It can't be. It's a Fox platform versus, an S550, soon to be S660, by the way. So I love it for its nostalgia. I love it for its growing classic, if you will, status. But the interesting thing is that I am just not compelled to do anything else to the car. I've got a car that's fast enough as it is. And so, but what about you guys? Let me get into chatting with y'all. Life after mods, what do you do after that? What types of projects do you start to get into? Just interested to see where y'all are at with this. Shawnee is saying Foxy's nice to see in the background. Yeah, she is. Fred saying, what's cooking, B? Got the ball guy in the arm flex. I like it. Shawnee saying I'm in the 11.8 to 12.0 fun zone in street trim, all stock drivability. I don't want to ruin that. You know what I mean? So that's really kind of the point. So a lot of guys, and this is, by the way, let me get back into the conversation because it basically went like this. I had this car. It was really nice. And then I modified it, and then it was kind of cool. And then I modified it a little bit more, and it was just too much, too fast, too rowdy, too racy, too loud, all this other stuff that you will hear from these guys. And the thing is that, so I drove, this is one of the few days, by the way, that we just didn't have a torrential downpour that lasted like all day. So streets were dry. I was able to get the cars out and actually exercise them a little bit. And I kill some flat spots in Revlon, which was kind of the thing, because she's just been sitting there for about 4 weeks. So driving Foxy around and took her to get the alignment check, everything checked out okay. I'm going to end up having to straighten out my own steering wheel because this place I took it doesn't know what the hell they're doing. I've done some kind of rewiring of the fans. I got a little bit more work to do with the car with the fan setup, but aside from that, I mean, you just drive the car around and have a good time with it. So I drive Foxy, and then I was like, oh damn, I got to drive Revlon. So I take Revlon out and I drive Revlon right after driving Foxy. And the funny thing about driving, now keep in mind, Foxy on a drag pack would be doing extremely good to run an 1180 or 1190. I mean, that's about where the car is at. But I would have to bonsai launch it. A real number is probably like a 1220, 1230, somewhere in that range, like a consistent 1230 car. Y'all know what Revlon runs like. I mean, that car runs mid-10s, like in the worst case, worst weather scenario, and in really good air, it'll run low 10s, 10 ones, 10 ones, 10 low 10 twos to mid 10 twos. So it was interesting driving the two. Foxy is just real torquey, real sharp, real quick throttle response, and Revlon by comparison is lazy, but it just accelerates like a banshee. I mean, it's just nuts. And so, I wound that thing up to some stupid numbers mile per hour wise today, talking about Revlon. And it just is stable. It just buzzes up to that speed and it doesn't have any issue getting there. Compared to Foxy, that car is a rocket ship, but from an excitement standpoint, it's kind of dull in a way because you don't get that instant throttle response. You don't have the whole theater of the sound and just the driving feel of a car that's, God, how old is that thing now? 30 years old? So that's kind of the point that I'm getting at here, is that you don't really understand what it's like to finally be done with a car until you start driving these things back to back. Revlon, in a way, almost feels slow compared to Foxy, even though Foxy is significantly slower than Revlon. It's just weird how it works out that way. So that's one of the reasons why, why did you get rid of it? It's like, well, it quit being fun. And that is the bottom line to what a lot of guys will end up saying. It's kind of where the conversation was going. It's like, when did it quit being fun? And, this thing behind me, I don't know that I would want much more power in it. I mean, it's not without some suspension work or different tires or something like that. It's just, it's just not really meant to be as fast as a modern car. So anyway, kind of an interesting kind of take on that deal. Let's see. Bruce is saying, sorry, I'm late for class. Teach just bought a 2017 Corolla with 68,000 miles as a daily, and I'm excited to save money. That's the best way to do it, man. The best thing you can do, it's funny, speaking of dailies, okay? What's funny is one of the things we were talking about, and Bruce brings up kind of another side to the topic. People end up falling in love with their dailies more than their hot rod. I have had dailies that I wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of. I had an old 2009 F-150 4x4 that I kind of wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of that truck. It was a daily, it was a beater. That thing was put through the ringer regularly. And if it weren't for the transmission going bad, I really should have just fixed the transmission and moved on. Ended up, I got a Dodge truck, and that Dodge truck led to Shalandra, which led to Revlon and this channel and everything else that goes around with it. But the funny thing is that you will have more memories of doing things in your daily than you typically will in your hot rod. That daily's got to be dependable. It's going to have a lot of character traits that your hot rod doesn't have. And, a lot of times it's kind of like with the work truck. I just hop in the work truck. I got something else I could drive, but I just get in Buffy because Buffy's cool. But love me some beaters, man. Good old cash cars are always kind of fun because you can wail on them. And the funny thing is about those types of cars is that on occasion they'll surprise you. They'll do something like, whoa, hey, punchy little thing, Whereas with a hot rod, if it's not, blowing your hair back all the time, you're disappointed with it. So another take on that. Doc Divson saying, sorry, I missed the intro. Caught the end of it. My next move is to LS swap the X10. That's the way to do it. Fred saying, after mods my Scat Pack, I'm helping my friends mod their Corvette Grand Sports. Nice. FBA's checking in and saying, what up, B? I'm really learning a lot from you. Well, thank you, buddy. So that leads me to the next point. I've talked about Foxy enough at this stage of the game. I mean, I know that there's folks that have asked if I'm going to do anything with it, if I'm going to do this, that, whatever. No, Foxy's staying exactly the way Foxy is, aside from tires or something like that. I'm going to leave Foxy alone. As far as Revlon goes, I've learned enough about this Mopar thing in the years that I've been playing with these things now, that when you get to a certain point with these cars, it's best that you go ahead and stop. Because here's the other side of the conversation that we were having. This is the kind of crap we talk about when we get around having lunch. The whole, buyer's remorse starts to kick in, especially if you have a car and you mod the hell out of it, only to have the next generation of the car that you have come out and, basically pummel this thing that you've spent all this money modifying. A lot of that will circle around Corvette guy, talking about vets here. I mean, I'm a recovering Corvette guy myself, having owned 2 Corvettes, Z06 and a 40th anniversary. And I love the vets. The funny thing about those cars is that I loved my C4, and I wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of it, except for the fact that it was like electrical problems left and right. Like you couldn't stop the swarm of little minor electrical gremlins, like the radio or the antenna or just some other minor WTF moment to pop up there. Tire monitoring system. Have you ever seen a tire monitoring, like an early model tire monitoring system? Like when they just started doing it, it looked like a beeper strapped to the rim. It was huge, big ass plastic thing. Anyway, bigger than a thing of Tic Tacs. Anyway, I loved driving that car. And with my Z06 having a big ass cam, some head work, intake stuff, the whole 9 yards, it made it to where it just wasn't fun to drive. I mean, it was fast, or at least faster, but you compare that C5 Z06 to a C6 Z06, and the C6 Z06 was making basically almost as much power to the rear wheels with a lot more torque, and it would have been stock doing the same. So, you're just left going, shit, I spent all this money and all this time, effort, energy, what have you, and what was the point? I mean, it ends up, just kind of being a waste. So, there's nothing like worrying in your modified car about a bone stock version of your car beating you. But that's, just again, one of the more minor topics is, there is a money component to it. Just be sure that you're ready to throw that money away when you go to sell it or resell it or whatever, because it actually got pretty tough for me to find a buyer for my vet. So, you want to talk about life after mods. So had the vet for quite a while, had a lot of fun with the car. And when it came time to get rid of it, it was actually kind of hard to find a buyer for it. That's why I keep saying, guys, if you're going to go cams, all these other modifications, stroker motor, that might not be the best play, only because you can't remove those parts. Well, you can, but realistically, you're not going to remove those parts to put a car back to stock to then sell on, to make it easier to sell, basically. You've got to have just the right buyer. And like I say, I went through that with that vet. And to be honest with you, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth in terms of getting real crazy with, ever doing big cams or stroker motors or anything else like that. Because I've been that way with the Mustangs before, with my 94 Cobra, 427, T-trim, the whole bit, Aeromotive fuel system. Car was nasty fast. And it was so nasty fast that nobody wanted to buy it. I happened to run across a guy that it was kind of brokering a sale between myself and another guy for a Viper, and the car ended up being part of the trade. The guy just wanted a really badass Mustang, and he knew the car. I didn't even know the guy, and he knew my car. Okay. And that's what made it part of the trade. But again, it was finding a buyer for that car that was such a pain in the ass. So you've spent all this money that you're never going to see again to try to find a buyer for the car once you want to get rid of it that you may not ever actually find. It lowers the value of the car because you now have a niche buyer that you got to go out and find. And then, of course, they're going to nitpick it and scrutinize it like they're some kind of expert, which they never really are. And all they want is something that they can get in and go screaming around and then complain that the buyer sold them junk when they blow it up. You know the type. So anyway, it makes it tough. And that's one of the things that, has made me a little bit gun shy of really going nuts with Revlon is that, something else comes along that's badass and I want to start liquidating part of the fleet. I want to make sure I can do it quickly. Shawnee's saying his 03 Termy seemed faster than his Hellcat. 10.7 versus 11.33. Go figure. Oh, I guess Dr. Diff, we ran into a spam or something like that. Talking about, there's a point of no return when it comes to modifying vehicles. Well, that's another issue is that with Mopars, it's kind of funny because there is a definite breach or definite wall, I should say, not breach, actually the opposite of that. There's a definite wall to entry. When you start talking about modifying a 5.7, you can not talking about the trucks, talking really more about the cars. You go 5.7, ported intake, big throttle body, cam, long tubes, and you start just stacking one thing on top of another on top of another. That car, naturally aspirated, will do really well to either be as fast or nudge out a 392. That's just reality. I mean, it takes camshafts and all these other monies to be just, spent like hell crazy on that car to get it to the point where it's going to be competitive and not embarrass itself against a 392. Same thing applies for a 392 versus a Hellcat, except you're almost in a worse place with the 392 because you spent premium money, but you haven't spent Hellcat money, but you got to spend more than Hellcat money to get the car to even come close to performing like a Hellcat, and that's being generous, by the way. Every time I start talking in this place, I get something blow up my face. Anyway, that's being generous. And so you've got to be real careful. You've got to be the type of guy that wants a hot-rodded, naturally aspirated car and doesn't worry about the supercharged or the turbocharged, forced induction, etc., that are out there lurking. You just got to be careful, and you got to make sure that you're not trying to play in that sandbox. The problem is that sandbox is always within view. And, a lot of guys want to just throw money at a car, and they'll have a goal of, I guess where I'm going with this is unrealistic or realistic goals that are marriage ending type of financial type of situations. It usually goes like this. What does it take? This is not that uncommon to get either. What does it take to get a 392 faster than a Hellcat? Money. That's it. What does it take? It takes everything. It takes the entire catalog to get that car to be faster than a Hellcat, a stock Hellcat, a Hellcat that, by the way, would have warranty, stock drivability, and a resale value that a modified car just cannot even come near. You know, the thing is that when it comes to resale, which it again, you know, life after mods, with so many people getting rid of the car within 2 to 3 years, you're gonna come to a place where you're getting rid of that car. So worrying about resale, like, why are you worried about resale? Because it's a very real part of modifying your car. Again, at some point that car is going away. You want to be able to get as much back for your investment as you can. Cars are typically not going to go up in value. And so it's a liability, not an asset once you start getting into this, and having that understanding is real important. And that's why I'm bringing it up in this Life After Mods video, because so many guys will ask over and over and over again and then get pissy about my answer when it comes to, okay, well, I want to make, and then insert some number, because numbers seem to matter to folks. Not real numbers like drag strip numbers, but dyno numbers, which are manipulated left and right. In fact, there was one video that was put up by a real popular distributor about one of their kits. I'm not going to get into the type of kit. And I responded to the video because they're showing uncorrected numbers. And it's a 426 kit is what it is. And they're showing uncorrected numbers. And these uncorrected numbers are on a dyno jet. And these dyno jet uncorrected numbers are not really flattering. And the video comes to you with all of these caveats and everything else. And there's a point to this, okay? So whatever with the video, right? The final number, it was like 476 or something like that. And it was funny because this is the same company that will advertise 500 horsepower to the rear wheels with a cam and long tubes on a 392, but then put out a 426 with stock manifolds, and it's 30 horsepower less, and it's clearly not using a stock cam. Anyway, there's a lot of deception when it comes to what guys, when they ask a question, I want to make X number of horsepowers. Well, then their car doesn't, okay? Because you can bet your ass that if anybody put a 426 in their car, put it on a dyno, and it didn't make 500 horsepower when they were promised that number, they're going to get a sour taste in their mouth. And that car goes from being in his garage for 3 years to a year and a half, or maybe even less, maybe a year max. And so it's having an understanding of what dyno numbers mean, which most guys do not. They have a cursory understanding at best, and at worst, they have a preconceived notion that all dynos are the same, and that if you put your car on this dyno, it's the same as if you put your car on that dyno. And if you only test on one dyno, that it's always going to be consistent, which they are absolutely not. And that I've tried to give examples of on this channel as often as I can to educate folks as to what actually works in terms of mentality wise, how to understand dyno numbers, how to understand the why behind a dyno, and did it really gain? Did it not gain? You would hope that it would be consistent. The only way possible that it can be consistent is if it is on an old school 248 dyno jet. That's the only dyno that doesn't care about load, doesn't care about any of the other nonsense like wheel speed sensed versus non-wheel speed sensed or any of that. You put the thing on the dyno, strap it down and hit it. And if you've got a tack lead available, you're in good shape. So it blows my mind, and it frustrates me to no end. So I can only imagine, somebody that that thinks they understand, but they really don't understand. And when they get bombarded with reality, you can just hear all the circuits start to fry in their head. Well, what do you mean it's not making X power? I'm just going to sell it. That's the other thing, by the way. I have heard that phrase uttered by guys. So y'all remember I was saying this has been like one of the few nights that we haven't had like just rain on top of rain. So you're going to probably hear quite a bit of that. So the shop is pretty well close to Velocito. Yeah, you're going to hear quite a few guys probably going out making hits tonight. Anyway, but yeah, that's I completely lost my train of thought. But I'm just going to sell the car. I'm going to sell the car. What's funny is that phrase typically gets uttered after somebody has spent a bunch of money on a build, on whatever kind of modification they're doing. It could be a stroker motor, a cam, it doesn't matter what it is. And it doesn't perform like they think that it's going to perform. More to the point, it doesn't perform the way they expected it to perform because they've had their head filled full of mush that people have been feeding them. Like aftermarket manufacturers said, this intake will give you 26 horsepower, and this cold air intake is going to give you 30 horsepower, and this tune, well, God, the tune's got to be worth at least 20. And they get into this mindset that they're going to go from making, 400 horsepower to 500 horsepower to the rear wheels, just by staring at the thing. I've heard some absurd claims. I've heard of people saying, oh, you can get 470 horsepower to the rear wheels out of a stock car. It's like, no, you can't. Take that shit to the drag strip and let's see what that 470 or whatever horsepower actually nets. Because the funny thing about it is that there's a lot of shops out there too that'll just give you a number that you can manipulate a dyno to put down just about whatever number you want. And if you want it to be nice, you can really make that dyno read a cherry number, and you'll see that. And so guys will have this dyno sheet, and look, my car made a big number at the dynamometer. And he takes his big number dynamometer queen and takes it out on the street and gets his shit pushed in by a car making a whole lot less power. I used to do it all the time with Shalandra. Here's the funny thing. Shalandra to the rear wheels, this is absolutely no joke, was the weakest of all of the 392 cars that we had ever put on the dyno. That car, the way that the dyno was reading, because dynos do read a little bit off, but with me setting the car up on the dyno, because you've got to be real particular when you're setting cars up on dynos, with me setting the car up on the dyno and configuring it, that car would make, this is kind of funny, it would make, say, 417, 420 horsepower to the rear wheels on a Mustang dyno. And what's interesting is that same car would go out and run 1130s. That car's twin build with weight reduction, which was, again, I don't think that car ever went on the dyno after it was initially tuned. It was initially tuned at like 422. That car goes out and lays down an 1125 with yours truly behind the wheel. So nobody else is doing this, by the way, at this time. In fact, we're talking untouched, uncracked 392 goes out and drops that number. My car ran 1130s, full weight, full trim. So a guy at that same track rental is saying, oh, well, my car makes 476 horsepower to the rear tires. That 476 horsepower to the rear tires, cammed car, by the way, ran a 1142. That's right, folks. That car was slower than my car. Oh, and the mile an hour was about the same at 118 and a half. His mile an hour was 118 or something like that. Mine was 118 and a half. Basically the same mile an hour. So that 470 horsepower, 477, I think is what the guy was claiming. 477 horsepower. Oh, and that's, by the way, with me driving the car. That's how I got the number. was slower than my stock cam car with, a tune, and that's basically it. How do you think that made the guy feel? Oh yeah, and that car had a lot of weight reduction too. Mine did not. So again, soon after, that car was gone, and for a lot of good reasons. The guy was basically lied to. Anyway, you can see how that ends up. But anyway, let's see. Jew saying modding cars is like guns, no returns, all lose. Actually, make a lot of money with guns. Let's see. Dr. Div's hanging out with him. Let's see. Gordon's checking in, saying, nice Mustang. Thank you very much. Dr. Div saying, dyno numbers don't mean a single thing. Put it on the track and let it roll, or put it up against another car and see what happens. The numbers are made, if you think about it in the correct spectrum, it's a tuning tool, and that's it. Yeah, and that's part of the problem, is that people forget that a dyno, especially a loaded dyno, is no different than just a torque wrench. When you have the car on the dyno and you're making changes, once it's set up, the number is irrelevant. In fact, I've said this over and over and over again, that once the car is set up and you make an initial hit, once you get the car set up, it's a bummer that the one thing that you cannot do is base 10 the power that the car puts out. And what that means is you have a scale from, say, 1 to 10, or 1 to, call it base 100, 1 to 100, and your peak horsepower number, let's say, would be corrected to 100. All right? Your peak torque would then follow the math backwards, and let's say it could be higher or lower than 100, but you get the idea that from there you make changes, and then you start looking at the percentages. Okay, well, this picked up 3% because it picked up 3 and change horsepower, or not, that didn't do any good, it lost power. It would almost be better to do that, because the number itself, again, can get conflated and just jacked around, because atmospheric conditions play a huge role in this. If the car's hot on the dyno, that makes a big difference in power that it's going to make. There are a ton of different things that can make the car make a lower or a higher number. And so for somebody that's simply using that contraption as a tuning device, I would love to be able to go in and go, okay, we're going to make our first hit. You make your first hit, correction factor base 100. Base 10, 10 is the biggest number, whatever, and you start moving things around. 100 would make it a lot easier because it would fall in line with percentages. But to me, that would make sense, because now I can say, okay, well, this is what the chart looks like. The graph wouldn't change. It would just be the numbers would change, because you're going off of specific base 10 or base 100, whatever it is. And for guys that are concerned, well, what does that translate into actual horsepower? Don't know. It's irrelevant, because your car is going to make a different number if it's cold outside. See, that's one of the funny things that people understand, and this is, again, what frustrates guys enough and is getting rid of their cars. If it's cold outside, your car may add timing. And if the car is adding timing, but your correction factor removes power, you could still be making more power because the car was cold. The corrected number isn't accurate. Conversely, if it's hot outside, your DA is going to be lower, so you're going to add power to that number to correct it to a 0 DA. But if it's hot and the car was hot when you made the pass and it's pulling timing, then that number is going to be artificially low. So you can see already there's ways to game the system just within parameters of heat and everything else. So again, it is important to understand all of that, but nobody understands that. The only thing that most guys, and I say most guys because it's typically dudes that get all butthurt about this stuff, but most guys don't understand how that all plays out, how that all plays together. And they get worked up into the numbers. And like Doc Div said, don't worry about the number. Take the car to the drag strip. Might be surprised how well that car actually does despite the number that you think it should be making. Jermaine, thank you very much, man. I appreciate that, buddy. Appreciate it a lot. Didn't have a question with it, but I do appreciate the contribution. Let's see. Light say, now that's a cool Fox body Mustang. I'll call it Sinister. Cool. That car's been called a lot over the years. Actually, at one point in time, that car was pretty nasty. For what it was 302 F-Cam 1.7s, GT40Y heads, and it had some bowl work done to them. GT40 intake, and it never had long tubes. It always had shorties because we were going through transmissions, and it was a lot easier to swap them out without messing with headers. So anyway, in that form, the car, I don't think the car ever went to the drag strip in that form. We just did all of our racing on the street with it. And man, on the street, this thing would hook. And that was a lot of fun, to say the least. But, it was, that was back when a mid 11-second car was really fast. And, we take this thing out and dead hook with this thing on a set of ET streets, the 26x10 ET streets that we used to run. It's kind of funny. It's still got the long studs in the back. It's got a truck carrier, 373s. It's kind of a carryover. Really, the car needs a set of 355s or 323s. But Dr. Div saying that's exactly the problem. I've seen people do the math on what mods they have and then think that they will make X number when it really doesn't work that way. It should make 500 per my build list. Yeah, right. Well, and that's the thing, like I was talking about that 426 that I was just mentioning that is posted up by the distributor. And the funny thing is that there's like some couching that went on. And what that means is anytime you couch a statement, it's like, well, this is what it did, but here's all the excuses why it didn't make more. Okay, that's couching a statement. And that video is couched like you wouldn't believe. It's like, well, the car was hot and it didn't have long tubes and it there was some other real, like, what? Like, why even mention it? First of all, why even post the video? Then why even mention any of this crap? Oh, talking about the big wheels that it had on it and all this other just whack shit, man. I'm going, what are you? Get the fuck out of here with this, man. Like, it was so funny, and the number was low, and this is on a non-inertial style dyno jet. This is on a loaded dyno jet. And again, it's a 426. It made like 470 to the rear wheels, and with every couched statement that you can see. By the way, that was an uncorrected number. Was not a corrected number, probably because the corrected number is more like 450. 460, somewhere in that range, so it's, oh shit, I'm actually surprised that the smoothing was set to 5. Normally when guys really want to cheat a number, they'll drop that smoothing number down to like 3, which will, as the chart goes up, there's little peaks, valleys, and smoothing just averages everything out per the pulses. And, so a lot of times, if you want to jazz up a number, you just jack the smoothing down. The chart will look a little bit more jinky, but you can spread the chart out a little bit by raising the numbers on the sides of the chart to where it flattens the actual curve a little bit, and so you don't see it, and so you can fake numbers in that way too. It's actually pretty. It used to be real common, and if you don't know what to look for, like you go, man, it kind of looks a little bit different, but okay, whatever. No, if you know what to look for, you can start to see where numbers have been manipulated. Numbers aren't lying, but they ain't telling you the whole truth either. Let's see. Hey, Jermaine, thanks, man. I appreciate that again. Saying, is there any benefit to running a 6.4 manifold on a 5.7 with a lockout plate? I haven't seen a benefit in that, but the reason why is to do that means that you're basically running a long runner version of a 5.7 manifold. And I don't know why the lockout plate thing is even out there. I think the lockout plate is to lock it in short runner. No, the lockout plate locks the short runners to where it's only long runner. It'll give you a definite boost down low. I can also tell you that in long runner form, up to about 5,300 RPM, that intake still makes power. So, to be honest with you, man, I just don't know that it's going to help you out a ton. The only other thing I can think of maybe is if you have a stock, like a stock 5.7, and you're wanting to run a bigger throttle body, there might be an argument that the 6.4 would be a little bit better for that. But I mean, if you get your stock 5.7 work done, I don't think that it's, stock 5.7 manifold at least opened up and the throat opened up for that throttle body. I think it'll be okay. The downside to the 5.7 manifold, there's pros and cons to both of them. The 5.7 manifold is simpler because it doesn't have a short runner thing going on. And the runners are only about that long in the 5.7 manifold. Very, very similar to the 6.1 manifold, by the way, guys. When it comes to performance, people ask, well, what about the 6.1 manifold on a 5.7? It will make no difference to put a 6.1 manifold on a 5.7. It just simply will not make more power. Not unless it's extrude honed or something like that. But if you take a 5.7, the only issue with the 5.7 is that the throat of a 5.7 manifold is tapered in. It's like a cone. And so you've got to go in and kind of open that up a little bit on the back end. I don't know that you can actively open it up as much as the throat, but I know that when I go in there, I do open them up quite a bit. One thing I've never done, and I've actually thought about doing this, is actually cutting the throat out of a 5.7 manifold. I don't know what it's there for. It's kind of a weird thing. If you ever look inside of I've got one actually sitting right over here that I just got the reporting for Doc Div. If you look at it, the throat goes like if this is an imaginary intake manifold, you can't even really see it even if I try to show it to you. The throat goes in, and then there's a deflector that's basically deflecting incoming air down into the plenum. The 6.4 doesn't have that. None of the other intake manifolds have that. It's just a weird kind of a design. And I was thinking, well, hell, I could get the Dremel with a cutting wheel, go in about that far, and then just cut that throat out. And then you'd have to kind of carve it up to get the balance of it out. But that's actually a thought of mine. I've been thinking about, how do I do that? I don't know. I need to find an old manifold and just see if I can do it. But again, the idea is that you would have a manifold that's basically, for lack of a better way of putting it, at that point, identical to a 6.4 or a 6.1. So, but as far as the 6.4 goes, man, I've heard of it. I just don't know if it does any good, honestly, when you've got an opportunity to get some pretty decent performance out of your 5.7 anyway. So I would say I wouldn't spend the money, to be honest with you. Let's see, where was I? See, Dr. Div's hanging out with Sovereign. Let's see. Nitro, worst feeling after big mods is saying to yourself, I ruined a really nice car again. Dude, that's what happened with that C5 Z06. And I tell you what, if you guys have never driven a stock C5 Z06, 385, 405 horse, it doesn't really matter. If you've ever driven one, really with an MGW shifter and a detent mod, which for you vet guys, you know exactly what I'm talking about with that detent mod. That is a sweet running car. Ergonomics suck, but definitely a sweet running car. And that one with a big cam and everything else, it pretty much did ruin it. Dr. Diss calling it a night, it looks like, hanging out with Sovereign. Got a pretty sick build coming with that car, too. That 426 is going to be pretty badass. Boosted saying he ran his car yesterday in 3200 DA and went 676 at 107. In 1200 went 652 at 112. Does that sound about right? Seems like a big loss. It could be about right. So a lot of that at 3200 foot DA might have been hotter. I have seen about that change, although the mile an hour does seem a little bit more of a loss. Look, and that's another thing. It could be beams, one lane versus the next, one day versus the next. But I've actually had that complaint at HRP before. But no, I mean, at 3,200 versus 1,200, you figure your car is making an extra, that's an extra 6% in terms of power that your car is making. That's a solid 2,000 feet. So that's a lot. Do the math backwards and you'll find out that that's going to be pretty big. Both runs are a 152 60 foot. That could be the case with the car making that much power on a 3,200 foot DA. Lots of heat, blowers making a lot of heat probably would cause that. I have seen that before, although the mile an hour drop is a little bit much. I'll typically not see any more than about in the 8th mile, if I'm typically at 105 at a low number and 106, 107 at a big number. So, percentage wise, I don't know how that works in, but you can kind of work those percentages in and see where that falls in line. But I'm also not generating near the heat that you are. Sovereign saying, elephant going in a scat, huh? Only if you want it to blow up about 3 pulls afterwards. Let's see. Oh, Pitch Black, thank you very much. Saying advice for 245 tires stock scat pack. Ran a 12.90 at 110, December 2019. Fun Day Sunday is tomorrow morning at Orlando Speed. Still waiting on drag radials. Well, here's part of it. Number one, don't get nutty with tire pressure. If you're running stock tires, they're designed to run at stock tire pressure. Trying to air them down. I've seen guys try to air stock tires down to like 16 pounds, 15 pounds. That's not going to be where they're going to be happy. 22 to 24 PSI is kind of your number for any radial at the drag strip, drag, stock, or otherwise. Get a little bit of heat into them, but not a ton. And practice your cadence on launch. That walking, load the thing up just a little bit on the converter, just so you're kind of loading the chassis, loading the mounts, and then your walking cadence, 1001 to wide open throttle. That's basically it. It's a full 1 second count, 1001 to go to full throttle. Practice it. All you got to do is sit in the car with your foot, 1001. Feel the throttle, 1001. Get the cadence right, 1001. That's what you're going to want to do to get those types of tires to hook on the track. There are some guys that'll tip in, and then once they feel the nose come up, they'll roll further into the throttle. That's kind of what you're doing with a 1 second drop on the throttle. You just don't, on a 245, you can't kind of roll into it and like do the two-stage roll in like a lot of guys do, where they'll go in and then walk the throttle, or they'll come into it real quick to about half throttle. And again, the idea there is when you feel the car come up, as you feel the car come up and you feel the weight transfer, that's when you start to roll the throttle in a little bit harder. The 1001, that cadence will get you kind of 1000, and by the time you're up here, you'll be at about 1001. And so you're on the tail end at about 3/4 throttle as the thing is coming up into the weight transfer zone of your launch. So just practice the cadence, get the car out, get used to how the car is going to feel at speed with tire pressures around 22, 23 PSI. And again, on the track, that will probably work, but the track's got to have really good track prep. If the track doesn't have track prep, do not lower your tire pressure, raise it to 24, 25, maybe even 26. And the reason for that is I have pattern tested these tires ad nauseum. And the thing is at 22 PSI, you still have a bit of a cup, but it's not as bad, obviously, as like 17 or 15 PSI. At the happy PSI for driving the things around on the street is going to be around 30 PSI. That's where the pattern is usually the flattest. Practice on the street at 30 PSI, launching the car, that 1001 cadence, and get a feel for how it's going to feel as you come off the brake and you roll into the throttle. You're going to start to notice where the car is going to want to break over, and then adjust your pressure down from there. I would probably argue that starting out at about 24 would be where your pivot number will be for those tires. 24, 23, 22, if you've got questionable track prep. If you've got really good track prep, bring it up a little bit. The idea is that you want to run the most pressure you can, because that is less rolling resistance. But again, practice, 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 practice. And it's really important that you get the practice down in lower traction environments so that you know how the car is going to act in those scenarios versus in a high traction environment. Because you only get so many passes at the track, but the street, you can actually get out there and play around a little bit. Bobby, thank you very much, saying best bang for buck I found for 392 SRT Challenger is the Whipple 3.0 supercharger for stock engine. Is it worth it? Would it be first and last horsepower upgrade? Or would be the first and last horsepower upgrade? It'll certainly be the last horsepower upgrade that you'll ever do to that car, because there probably won't be much left of it, your transmission, or other reciprocating parts. And the reason why I say it that way is because you're going to put the Whipple on your car. Whipple 3.0 is designed for, you can run 8 second quarter mile times with that blower. So what will end up happening is, number one, you won't be anywhere near the potential of that blower, but your discharge temperatures will be low. You install that on your car, and you are basically limited by fuel quality and compression ratio to somewhere around 6 pounds of boost, maybe 7 pounds of boost. And at that number, you're going to make an extra, say, 150 horsepower at the rear wheels, best case scenario, by the way, but torque is going to come along with that, and a big torque hit down low is not really all that great for an HP70 transmission. So best bang for the buck, yeah, kinda. Just hope that it's not a bang coming from the engine that then requires a lot of bucks to fix. That's what a lot of guys end up finding with 392s. If you try to go with a positive displacement supercharger, it's, even if you've got the tune sedate enough to work with whatever fuel you've got in your area, whether it's 91, 93, or what have you, what ends up happening is that you invariably, most guys end up getting greedy, and they go, okay, well, I want a little bit more pulley. How do I go about doing that? Well, if I put just a little bit of pulley, it's not going to hurt it, right? Well, that's like a denial-based question. And the problem with the denial-based question is that there's an inherent hope that it's not going to break, as opposed to knowledge of that's probably not the best idea in the world when it comes to this type of a modification. In other words, going past 6 or 7 pounds of boost is an invitation for failure. And it's not because pistons are made out of glass or anything like that. It's you've got parts downstream that simply were not designed to deal with that kind of power. And I'm not even worried about your drive shaft. I'm more worried about your transmission, especially if you put the thing on a sticky tire, which you're gonna need anyway, because A 392 with a positive displacement supercharger, even at low boost, is no joke to drive around. They're actually a shitload of fun. But you're going to need to have a drag radial to make it work. And unfortunately, that HP70 at around 535-ish foot-pounds of torque, 540 foot-pounds of torque, they can start to fail. And this is, of course, on a Mustang dyno. On a dyno jet, or something that's a little bit less stingy maybe than a loaded dyno, you figure around 575, 590 to the rear wheels in terms of torque. That's where they're going to start to run into a problem, which is a bit of a problem here because that's exactly where the power is going to be with that supercharger. Now the next question might be, well, what about building the HP70 or an HP90 swap? Just don't. If you find yourself in that scenario, then you will find yourself financially Hellcat deep into this car in terms of what you could have done. You figure a 3.0 Whipple plus the tuning plus the stuff that's actually going to make it work right, which is to say fuel system, injectors, and everything else down the road. That's about a $12,000 to $15,000 ticket. You'd be better off taking your $12,000 to $15,000 with your Scat Pack and finding yourself a Hellcat that already has all of that stuff already done to it. Plus, it's got a transmission that will handle all the power that you could ever hope to throw at it. And you'll have a car that has exceptional resale value. Now, granted, yes, you'll have to pay a premium for it, but think of the upside. You got a Hellcat. And then from there, it's just a gear and really a pedal commander, or a gear and a tune away from being a mid to low 10-second car, something that 392 is going to struggle to get to, even with some work done to it. Now, I'm not saying it can't be done. I know a lot of guys that have done it. They've had a lot of fun with them. They've done the E-Force kits, and they've done the Whipples, the older style Whipples, and they've had some good success with them. But the problem there is that, again, life after mods. You've spent all this money on a car that is supercharged, that's not as fast as a supercharged car that is stock from the factory. So I would caution you on spending that kind of money on that kind of car. It's just not. Again, life after mods, it fits the topic perfectly. You're going to have a ball with the car just long enough to run up against somebody with a Hellcat that's going to put a sting on that thing. For me, 392 cars are left best naturally aspirated. And at that point, ported manifold, bigger throttle body, long tubes, a tune, that'll get in a Hellcat airbox with a Hellcat filter. That'll get you quite a bit. That's going to take you basically into the mid to low 11-second zone with good air. And I mean, what's more fun than that, right? And to be frank, your Whippled 392 won't be much quicker than that. So I would say stick with the fun stuff, make it a fun car, and don't try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to 392 cars. It's just not going to play out the way that you hope it will. I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. And unfortunately, the laws of physics keep not changing in the meantime. And again, it's transmission and it's compression ratio that you're up against with that Whipple setup. But the other problem is that the cars come with a tight ring gap. And this is basically the reason why I'm saying don't do it. With the higher compression, it's going to have higher combustion chamber temperatures. You're going to want to open up the ring gap on those pistons to where you can actually run a decent amount of boost, but yet your fuel quality is going to be stressed to try to even make a decent amount of boost with the weight of the vehicle that you're dealing with. Because now you got to overcome inertia. High compression with boost works great if you've got the fuel to cover it, but if you don't have the fuel to cover it, it's going to feel lazy. You're going to be yanking so much timing down low, the car's just not going to feel the way that you will hope that it would feel. So Not trying to rain on your parade, just being honest with you. That's typically how that's going to work out. Let's see. Hang on. Tux is asking, hey, B, how are you? Doing good, buddy. Just saw that in. Let's see. What the hell? Hang on. I'm just kind of going through some of the comments here. Light saying, why everybody is hating on the 5.7 motor? Ignorance is one of the reasons why people hate on a 5.7. The 5.7 is an awesome engine, especially when you look at it from the point of view of the 5.7 sounds great, it's durable. Guys have been having a ball with 5.7s for the longest time. And as a matter of fact, if it weren't for the Hellcat, and if the 392 was at the top of the food chain, the 5.7 would be real attractive for guys that would want to put superchargers and things like that on a car because, they've got a lower, the ring is lower on the ringland. There's a lot of reasons why 5.7s can be attractive. And I don't know, man. People always pick on the youngest kid, right? And what's fun, or the littlest kid, and that's just the way that it is. If 5.7 doesn't make the power of a 392, it doesn't fit in. It doesn't fit into the performance reign of or the performance hierarchy like the other engines do. But it's certainly no slouch. And what you've got to remember is it's 370 horsepower out of 345 cubic inches. That's kind of choked down, and that's that's one of the funnier things, that if the 5.7 was just given a fair shake, I think a lot of folks would be surprised with the type of power you can get out of one just by putting a set of 6.1 or 6.4 Hellcat whatever manifolds on it with the right exhaust system. That, along with the tune, is worth a nice chunk of power just to start the conversation off. So why do people hate on it? I don't know. It's an easy target, but the reality is that they shouldn't. And the 5.7 absolutely has a place. I just don't know why people keep bugging on it. Let's see. Hang on. Dr. Div's asking, is this the same 426 I'm thinking of? I don't know what 426 you're thinking of, bro. Or I guess the appropriate question is, are we talking about the same 426? I mean, I don't know. The one that I'm talking about is one that was posted up. I don't want to front any of the distributors out or anything like that. It was just a weird post, weird video that I just happened to stumble across. Every excuse in the book why the thing didn't make some kind of monster number. Don't make excuses. I mean, the thing's going to make what it's going to make. I mean, explain why, but it's just the way that it was, the way that it looked and the way that it sounded was just so couched down. I'm thinking, you don't have to do that, and it was almost like this really wasn't our best effort. It just made basically the same horsepower as a 392. What? I mean, it was just, anyway, there's different ways to look at it. Dr. Dev's talking to Sovereign about the build that he's doing for that 426. Yeah, no, this was a, again, the one that I was talking about that had posted up a number on that 426 just wasn't making the kind of power. Dr. Div's talking about he likes to keep the variable runner. Yeah, I mean, he's responding to a lockout question about a 392 manifold if you just use a lockout plate. Yeah, I wouldn't want to use if you can use the variable runner intake, because it absolutely does make a difference. There's a reason why guys hook up the two-step type of a window switch. That's the reason why they do that. Gordon's asking, anybody know how to fix a prolapse? I don't know what that is. Dr. Div's talking about that window switch some more. Saying not calling tonight, but am soon. Yeah, I know the feeling. Tux, that is a 1989 Mustang GT sitting behind me. Let's see. Talk to Bobby about that Whipple. Cal's asking, when you launch, are you slamming on the gas pedal or gradually stepping onto or into the throttle? It depends. I typically, if the track prep is good and I've got a good set of tires with the Hellcat, I can literally treat that gas pedal like a light switch. But a lot of times I don't get that option. And so what I'll do is I'll roll into the throttle pretty hard. I'll kind of roll into the throttle. I'll feel the car start to lift the front end, roll into the throttle a little bit harder. And then if it hooks, and I'll kind of finish up the job of putting it to the floor. So it might be whop, whop, and then put it to the floor. It's just kind of a cadence thing with my foot. If the first pass, I'll typically do that. It'll be kind of rolling real quickly. It's like a 3/4 second roll in with the type of tires that I use. But it's going to be basically, I'll treat that thing like a light switch if the track prep's good. So those tires hook, that's exactly what you want to do. You want to get to wide open throttle as fast as you can, provided that the track will hold it. Dr. is saying Whipple makes a 3.0 for the 5.7 or 6.4, must have been released soon. I think they do. I think they've got a way to get that 3.0 on the NA cars now. Pitch Black's asking, any certain drive mode? It's an auto. I use sport with suspension in street. Let's see. How fast is that Supra behind you? The Supra behind me. I've got a Supra behind me. That'd be sweet if I had a Supra behind me. I don't have a Supra behind me. That is a Mustang. Sovereign saying, I'd like to report that I have been running 89 in the ES350 and have had more time to notice the difference. Don't know anything about that. Basically, the only thing I run any 89 in is the work truck. I never run 87 in that truck. It just doesn't run right. Sovereign saying, I agree. The 392 is perfect the way it is. Yes, it is. Bobby's saying, thank you. I take your advice extremely seriously and will play this video and take advice on the other stuff you said. Last thing I want to do is blow the engine reading the Whipple website. They made it sound safe for stock at 6 PSI. Yeah, see, here's the thing, though. They'll say that it's safe at 6 PSI, but they can't control the fuel quality that you're using, Bobby, and that's a bit of a problem, you see. And, they're going to say, well, 91 octane, it's safe for 91 octane. What 91 octane? Is it summer blend? Is it winter blend? There's a difference. And so I always will err on the side of caution when it comes to boosting a 392. Again, number one, the car's heavy. What is safe on a dyno is not necessarily going to be safe on the street. They also can't control what kind of tire you put on your car. Again, a real sticky tire is going to load up that transmission pretty hard. That transmission may not be able to handle what you're doing to it. So there's another reason why I would say be careful when you're talking about putting especially a positive displacement supercharger on your car, because positive displacement supercharger will yield much higher cylinder pressures because you get all of this boost crammed into a cylinder at very low RPM, which means lots of cylinder pressure with a lot of dwell time. The clock is just tick-tocking away with this thing coming up and being at maximum cylinder pressure and trying to overcome inertia. In other words, the mass of the vehicle that it's trying to propel at that point. So fuel quality becomes a major concern in those types of scenarios. At that point, a centrifugal style supercharger like a ProCharger, Vortec, or other types of centrifugal superchargers are actually safer because you don't get this huge torque hit. In other words, you don't get a huge pressure hit down low. It's spread out in essence over the course of the RPM band. So again, it's just having an understanding of how that cylinder pressure is going to be translated further down the line in terms of overcoming inertia, and also understanding that with a different type of supercharger solution, if you want to make bigger horsepower, you need to have that higher cylinder pressure or higher boost pressure further on down the line, and not when you're just trying to get the thing to move. It's great if the engine is built for it, but if it's not built for it, that's how you break stuff. And again, I'd be willing to venture a guess that even at 6 PSI, you're going to be deep into torque values that transmission was just simply not designed to deal with. And again, getting that transmission built to contend with those types of pressures, well, now you're dealing with a $5,000 proposition at least. That ain't good. That's too much money. You've already spent all this money on a blower. Now you got to drop another $5 large on transmission upgrades. And that may not even include the tuning that you're going to need to do to the transmission, which could be a retune at this point, or the fact that you've spent a bunch of money on a blower and a bunch of money on a transmission, when again, you could have taken that same amount of money plus your car and found a car already built from the factory designed to handle it. So I always caution against it. It's a great car. 392s are awesome. Y'all know I love them, love them, love them. I've been flying the 392 flag for a long, long time. But its weakness isn't in the cylinder, isn't in the pistons. It's nothing to do with that. It's not the higher compression. It's the transmission that they chose to put behind it. If the 392 came with an HP90, my opinion would probably be significantly different. So take that for what it's worth. Sovereign Knight saying he'll take either one of those V8s over an SXT for sure. HU37 saying the only Mopar I would consider modding is the 5.7, Edelbrock E-Force, limited slip diff, exhaust and wheels and tires, fun car to drive, easy to return to stock when time to sell. Guys, that's been my go-to combination for forever. And it's actually one of the more fun cars to drive, taking a 5.7 with an E-Force and an exhaust. That car will make more power than a stock 392 will to the rear wheels. It's got all the theater behind it, but it's not going to overtax the transmission. And I mean, dude, by rights, you can really get one to make a decent number to the rear wheels. 440, 450 to the rear wheels is significantly more than a 392 on a Mustang dyno, which would normally make like stock 400, 405, 410, maybe at the most. So you're making a significant chunk better than a 392. It falls in line with what that transmission can manage. It's a fun ass car to drive, and it will go deep into the 11s if you're big into going to the drag strip on a tire and all the rest. So I can't see a downside to it. And you're right, easy to go back to stock. It's a clean install, looks factory, looks beautiful from an installation standpoint. If you decide you want to go back to stock, I mean, it's super easy to do. So, I mean, aside from the fact that you will have pinned your crank, I guess that's the one thing that whoever buys the kit's going to have to get. But a lot easier to put back to stock than, trying to go other routes. And so, yeah, I'd sign off on that all day long. HU37 saying, if I owned a Scat, I'd keep it NA, wheels and tires, Hellcat airbox. No sense in trying to reinvent the wheel on that one, for sure. Light Grid's asking kind of a cool question. Other than Mopar, what's your second favorite car manufacturer? Man, so I've got kind of a few in terms of favorites. It's kind of hard to say because there's so many that I think are cool, but it depends on how you're going to look at the actual type of cars here. But my first default is going to be something off-road. So I'm going to say Jeep. I'm going to say, something like a Land Cruiser. Toyota does a great job there, but it's going to be a Jeep of some kind. Will be my second favorite, which is still kind of in the Mopar family, but like AMC style, like a Wagoneer, something along those lines. I love those things so much. Surprised that I don't own one, actually. From there, International Harvester, Scouts, I love those, but Jeep will always be like my number one, second favorite, if not number one favorite. And also, funny you should bring it up. So again, life after mods. So this is something else that I've noticed over the years and years of being around this. If you're used to trying to go fast, drag strip, whatever the case is, it could have been cars, could have been motorcycles. It doesn't matter if you're big into something like that. There's going to come a time, usually, when you're just like, damn, this is getting old. I'm getting bored with this. I can't keep up, whatever the case is. And almost every single one of those folks goes to a Jeep of some kind. Always. You will not see a performance hot rod contraption in their garage anymore. Instead, you'll find some type of an off-road Jeep. It could be you'll take all this big money that you were putting into your hot rod, and once you've collected as much of that back as you possibly can, I'm trying to think of somebody that hasn't ended up going to Jeep of some kind, whether it was a Wagoneer or one of the CJs or YJ. It could be anything. That's usually where they go, and the reason for that is because at some point, you get sick and tired of the rat race of trying to keep up with the Joneses. And you want to talk about life after mods, it's almost like you get this huge weight lifted off of your shoulders where you've been spending money that you ain't got to impress people who you don't know. What the hell that was. But you're spending money you don't have to impress people you don't know, and it's frustrating, it's annoying. If people, hey man, want to race, and all this other stupid shit. These guys get Jeeps, they go to Jeep jamborees, they have fun, and it's just a friendlier environment. Everybody's trying to be, Billy Bigcock at the fucking drag strip, and the funny thing is that those guys don't stick around very long, or they find out that, dude, nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to be around you. If you don't know that guy, if you don't know a guy like that, then chances are you might be that guy. And people get sick of being around these, asshole mentality type guys that have just it'll end up ruining this, lifestyle for you. So they ditch the hot rods. Sometimes they get into boats, but it's rare. Usually it's Jeeps. It's never going to get into the big trucks or anything like that. And that's because it becomes something that you don't want to have end up owning you. And there's always a buyer for a Jeep. It doesn't matter what you've done to a Jeep. Somebody will just start handing you cash for it. But again, what guys end up finding out is that these cars end up owning you, and again, getting rid of them and getting away from them ends up being like this big relief. Or you get rid of it and then you have a different sense of understanding, so that when you get back into mods and working on cars and things like that, you've got a clear understanding of what you don't want to do. And most of the time, it's knowing what you don't want is as important, if not more important, than knowing what you do want. So I'll give you a perfect example of that. I had given Foxy to my dad for Father's Day about 15, 17 years ago. And yeah, he was playing with it. He was doing his thing with the car. I had my my 94 Cobra 427 blower, the whole bit. At one point, though, I am not kidding, I got rid of all my tools. I said, I am never going to work on another car again for the rest of my life. That's how frustrated and over it I was. You know, having to deal with constant braking, stuff not, holding together, that whole bit. And that's even, so I'm speaking from a place of experience. I'm not just, saying, well, this is something that could happen. No, this is stuff that I've lived through myself, and the frustration is real, and it will get to you. I literally sold all my tools, and figured, look, I'm not going to find myself in this trap ever again. Well, there's Foxy still in the family. There's Sierra. There's the Camaro. The Hellcat's at the house. You get the idea. So. Let's see. Oh, Tuxedo saying he had a little bit of experience with the old Mustangs. I like it. Talking about different exhaust modes. Yeah, there are. In fact, there's becoming more and more prevalent in stock cars to have adjustable exhaust. Pretty cool. Sovereign saying Toyota may be boring for some, but they are certainly a solid investment. And Sovereign saying Jeep is the original off-roader. Certainly is from a mass production point of view. Light saying, heck yeah, I've driven a Jeep Wrangler and other Jeep owners would wave at me while I drove past and I waved back. Oh yeah, dude, here's the funny thing. Foxy and Sierra get all the love. I drive around the Hellcat and people flip me off and call me an asshole, I'm sure. But Foxy and Sierra get tons of love, man. And the same with Jeeps. I mean, Jeeps are just different, man. Life's a lot simpler, a lot easier, a lot more fun. You can always build a hot rod out of them. Don't get me wrong. You can always go nuts. You can go nuts with anything, but the Jeep has just a lot better, community just in general. So I'm saying Rubicon trips, yep. Don't forget Moab. Liger saying cool community, yep, that's what I was talking about for sure. So I'm saying good thing Chrysler bought AMC. Yep, they bought AMC just for the Jeep brand. HU37, people spend money because emotion overrules reason. Yeah, that's kind of what makes us all human. Saying you reach a point where you go into another direction or the car owns you. Yeah, and that's one of the things you just don't want to end up happening. And again, it's, I've got to straighten the steering. I don't have to, but I mean, there's just little nitpick things. Like I've got to straighten the steering wheel out in Foxy, plus I've got to rebuff and re-wax and do all that stuff with her too. So there's a lot of work coming in. Guess who gets to do that? This guy right here. But Tux is saying his favorite Yoda is the 4Runner. Can they be dailies? Hell yeah, they can be dailies. People daily those things all the time. What's funny is that older 4Runners are stupid expensive, just like the Wagoneers are. Although you can find Wagoneers fairly inexpensive, but for a full-on resto, they're just absolutely nuts. I mean, I remember when those things were throwaway items. So, it's just funny how much people value those types of vehicles. And nothing that you would ever consider fast by any metric whatsoever, but they're just awesome to drive. You just kind of get good vibes driving them. And, it's just such a different experience than driving something like a Scat Pack that will get you from 0 to arrested in about 3.5 or 4.5 seconds. It's just this rowdy car that those other ones, they're just laid back. They're cool. You want to do something fun? Let's go do something fun, man. You want to be cool? Let's be cool. It's all good. So yeah, it's pretty cool stuff, man. Tux is saying that, one of his uncles has got one of those 4Runners. Yeah, they're good trucks, man. Well, guys, we are coming up on an hour and a half. I am going to go ahead and pull the ripcord on this one because I got to wake up early in the morning. But I want to thank each and every one of y'all for hanging out with us tonight. Love each and every one of y'all. Couldn't do it without you. So stay safe out there. If you're going to send it, don't bend it. Keep your shiny side up. And with that, that is a wrap. Y'all have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll catch up with you next week. Adios.